Okay, so you've just found the perfect commercial property and there's a demolition clause in the lease. What does that mean? Let's talk about it.
Buenos dias, Mr. Novak.
Oh, the Mexican, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How you doing?
Yeah, good. So you've given me a harsh reality this morning, and I've been calling you Mexican for a long time, and you just admitted this morning that this isn't the first time in your career.
This isn't. I think let's make it clear. Let's make it straight. I'm not Mexican. I'm Chilean. But when this starts to grow out,
Chile.
and you're dark as this on the northern beaches, I think you just kind of fall into it. But it's true. Like not the first gig where I've been called it, but it's funny. I love it. You
take it like a champion.
Yeah.
So Mexican. This is something that we want to teach people about demolition clauses, because it sounds serious. It potentially can be serious.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene. Okay, so your offer's been accepted into a commercial property. You get the lease back, or you get the heads of agreement back, and it says demolition clause to be put into lease. Yep. What is it?
So a demolition clause, commonly, I mean, it is a commercial leasing term. Commonly in a retail lease, but it can essentially span over to a different range of leases. It's something that a landlord or an owner back in the day would probably keep in their back pocket. And it's something to say, hey, if I've potentially got something I want to do with this property, my land, something small, something big, I'm going to give you an exact amount of time, potentially, minimum 6 months, 9 months of time. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to action that plan. And the thing with anything that someone's going to do, you need proof, right? You need evidence. You need something to kind of show, hey, well you can't just let me go. Like, really? Like, I'm all excited to enter this lease. You're a tenant. You're like, sweet, I found the spot. And it's like, well, really? Like, what do I do? So really with a demolition clause, it's setting the scene for advancements, something to upgrade the property that essentially an owner or landlord's looking to do. But I'd say let's give an even bigger scenario. Let's kind of like storytell here with this. For instance, hypothetical property in Brookvale, and we know Brookvale going through major upgrades, major redevelopment as a whole, the suburb, and you've got a property there. Fantastic tenants come along, said, hey, you know what? I'm all excited to get started. Another tenants come along, ready to get started. So you've got two parties that are looking to enter into this property. They've been hit straight hard though, right from the get-go. Demolition clause in place. The idea for the demolition clause is coming from an idea that spanned years and years and years in the making. Hence, in our title today, a DA. So
so just some baby talk. It's a 500 meter square block of land. When it was built 50 years ago, it was just two shops. It was single story, and it was just two shops, maybe a residence above. 50 years later, there's been a rezone on the property, or maybe even 40 years later, 10 years ago, there was a rezone on the property, and the rezoning allowed 3 stories. So the owner's going, well, do I build the 3 stories? I don't really have the time or money, but one day do I want to stitch the property up with a tenant for 20 years or 10 years, or do I want to sort of keep my options open? So I guess if the property has the opportunity to be further developable, it can potentially freak a landlord out from signing a long lease. But more often than not, these owners never actually end up exercising the demolition clause. They never end up developing the property, but they just want to have that option open.
Absolutely. Options is such a big thing, and a lot of the time too, when it's taking so long, it's sometimes really out of their hands. But sometimes too, it's potentially that they don't have the funding at that point in time, So
Yep.
essentially, it looked to say, hey, if someone was to potentially come along and offer me an exemplary sum of money to say, I'd love your site, I'd love to do something with it, it gives that owner to say, beautiful, that'd be great. This is something that I can actually work with. I'd say though, looking at a site, and if you're a tenant looking at a site and you're kind of gauging whether or not that there's going to be a demolition clause, I think a pre-conversation we're having to all of this is signs of the building or the site. It's an underdeveloped site, or it's a site that's aging or is aged.
Yep.
So it's kind of indication that there could be something that's going to happen here in, further down the track, or is coming up to something. So
I guess you can say a new property will never have a demolition clause in its lease, because you can't. It's at its maximum potential, but certainly the older ones, yeah,
definitely. So it's looking at options for the owner and the landlord. It's looking at further potential for the property. I'd say
Now,
go on, sorry.
Nathan, I find with demolition clauses, they're always a hassle with tenants. Tenants just don't know what they are. Tenants just freak out because of them, because they don't want to be told, 6 months later or 9 months later, you've got to go. So often these demolition clauses are very intimidating to a tenant. But the reality is, often the landlords are just dreamers. They just want to keep that dream alive and keep that dream open, but they never actually do it. So I think it's really, really worthwhile to look into to explore it as a tenant, because I reckon you are getting cheaper rent as well as a tenant, because if it is dilapidated, and if it is a bit older, if that tenure is not being given of 3x3 or 5x5, often the landlord will rent it for half or 2/3, which can be perfect for a tenant.
Absolutely, especially it's one of those businesses where it's not been around for such a long time. It's still generating business as a whole, and it's probably plotting yourself in an area that it's outside of where you've started from, and it's building that rapport. It's building that brand. But again, it's not something ultimately to be intimidated about, especially when it's about both parties being happy. And one of them, of course, is the owner or the landlord looking to say, all right, I'm happy to reduce the rent, build incentive over the property, because yes, okay, the demolition clauses have been intimidating. And you could also look as well, yes, from the perspective of a tenant. You're going there, you're spending X amount of money on the fit out. Some people's fit out's completely simple, other people's it's a bit hefty, and you're going through quite a bit of chunk of per income to make it happen. But then as an owner and a landlord, you say, all right, well, if that's the case, I can look to say this: I'm happy to contribute to X amount of your fit out for the sake of the demolition clause, for the sake of my future plans or options that I've got. And that way you don't feel like you've lost out too much. But I think
you could get cash on the way out.
Yeah, exactly. So it's giving that it always comes back to a sense of security, but back to the kind of the story that we were wrapping up from before. It's like, okay, demolition clause, it's clear as day, it's right before you. Okay, come the time that it's to be exercised by the landlord or the owner, giving you a minimum of 6 months, probably any maximum of 9 months. You've got X amount of time to be here. Sorry.
Well, it can be layered. Hey, that period can be layered. It can be 6, 9, 12, 18. It can be after the first 3 years of the lease, or after the first 6 years, or 1 year, or 3 years. The rent can change. Like, it can be, it's up. There's actually no set clause, is what I'm saying. It's whatever the parties agree to. And also, Nathan, I think something important to consider for people is the duration of a lease and the duration of a DA and the likelihood of a DA.
Yeah.
These DAs can be in the making for years and years and years, and financing can be in the making for years and years and years. So I think you'll find often it'll push past. So can I give an example? You could have
Absolutely.
a 3 year by 3 year lease, and on that you could say within the first 3 years no demolition clause, and within the second 3 year of the lease there's a demolition clause, but the owner has to give you 1 year notice. And if the owner gives you 1 year notice, they have to give you 50 grand if they execute the demolition clause in the second years. So there's some layering and there's some financial consideration that can come into a negotiation.
Absolutely. It's peeling back the layers, and it's making people feel like they're not missing out or losing out or anything like that. But then, of course, once the landlord, the owner's decided, hey, I've exercised it, I've given you the agreed amount of time, that person then looks to leave, and you've got a building that's going to take 18 months, 24 months. It's a considerable amount of time. But the beauty of it that you can then work with is to say, hey, okay, you've gone for that amount of time, you've gone to build or you've gone to operate somewhere else. How about when it's all ready to go, you can come back.
Yeah,
you can come back
that's
to this
a big one.
spanking new property, and you can have
Yep.
a say in just how you want it. That's such an incentive. Like, it's incredible.
That's a big one. And that could almost be like a holiday period for a tenant, that if they build up say they build up a good food business, they could say, look, we're going to pause it for 12 months, build what you need, purpose build. And you may actually even structure that into your lease as well, saying if a new premises is provided, this is the per square metre rate that we all agree to pay. That may help you.
Definitely. And that's exciting to think about, like it's hard to see it when you're in that moment, like you hit 18, 24 months, you're like, forget it, don't worry about it, I'm off, but when you're given options, people love options. And I think you can agree, in negotiating with people, you give people options, they gobble it up and they go, beautiful, I'm not locked into the one thing, I don't feel like I'm being restricted, and it's a win-win for everyone,
Yep.
So
cool.
Yeah.
I think we covered a good story today for people. About demolition clauses, guys. If you've just tuned in, they are out there in leases. It means the owner can knock down the property, but there's some really good benefits for tenants, believe it or not. Like much cheaper rent, like some clauses that can get them into a new property after, or and you can sort of understand it from a landlord's point of view, that you don't want to box yourself out by not having that clause in there as well. So that's a story.
That's a story. I love it. Mark, it's almost Christmas. You getting ready or what?
Oh, you can feel it now. You can feel that hitting December, it was just like, bring it, like you could just feel it everywhere. Traffic, shopping centres, people, vibe, crazy, especially with a big sunny day yesterday.
I know, but back to the gloom. You got to really rise above it. Bloody hell.
Or in one day, it was just the best day in ages to the shittiest day in ages. It just within 12 hours, it's weird.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, look, guys, thank you so much for tuning in this morning and getting a bit of a gist of what we talk about, what we do on a daily. Mark, pleasure as always.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mexican. And if you got any questions, guys, any comments, questions, or topics you want us to talk about, a lot of our content is generated from people's requests.
Absolutely.
Direct message us or let us know in your comments here. We can talk about it tomorrow. We're in see you guys.